Good morning, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss here at allpointstv.com again on Monday, coming to you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as always, and want to also welcome to the viewership and listenership all the fans of allpointstv.com and also the fans of the WFOB Radio Network 92.1, and we're glad to have them aboard as well. They are new partners in crime, and we're always glad to have them aboard, and want to also thank you for tuning in, because without you, we would not have any purpose here. Well, I guess we would have a little bit of a purpose. John and I could sit here and talk to each other for the next hour. I don't know. I would enjoy it, but I don't know what John would get out of it, but...
No, that'd be cool, but it's just you're too busy reading and blogging all the time. I mean, I don't think people realize how much you not blog, I post on Facebook. I mean, you write volumes. I've never seen you do that much.
I just left the post I did, which I invite all of the listeners to tune in, because that is one of my most provocative Facebook posts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we get off the air today. Thank you again for tuning in. And we are just delighted. Paul Herring, I want to thank you for allowing us to come to your audience and present this program as well. And you're doing a fine job with the WFOB network, and we want to thank you for the job you're doing in the community. We're doing some things here too, and together we're going to get this job done. No matter how long it takes, we're going to stay at it until victory is won. And it may not happen necessarily in the next couple of hours or weeks, but we're here for the long run, and we're going to stay. We're going to stay the course until everything is done that we intend to do. And that's how committed we are here at the allpointstv.com studio, and we're going to stay at it until this job and this mission, which we first thought was impossible, mission impossible, but to us it's just a mission to be accomplished, and we will stay the course. I want to talk about a couple of topics here today, maybe two topics in particular that I think will prick your interest. I want to talk, and I'm not sure which one of these two I want to take in order. I'm dealing right now on Facebook with two issues that are tied into what I think the Donald Trump the Donald Trump administration is dealing with right now. And I think what he's dealing with has to do with some of the things that occurred in the 1960s. And I'm going to be talking around the Donald Trump issue, but I'm going to be tying it into some other things that go back to John F. Kennedy. And believe it or not, the NASA program that I'm tying that into, because I'm writing something that's very controversial, probably my most controversial post that I've written on Facebook, because I'm challenging a couple of theses here. One of which is that I'm challenging the Warren Commission report on the Kennedy assassination. I consider the Warren Commission report to be a work of fiction, and this conclusion that they drew, the conclusion that the Warren Commission report drew, which is that a lone gunman on the 6th floor of the school depository building in Dallas, a single gunman by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots, and those shots led to the ending of President Kennedy's life. And there were no other shooters in Dealey Plaza, and the so-called magic bullet, which caused 7 different injuries in 2 different men. A magic bullet, they call it, because if it had done the things they said it did, it certainly was a magic bullet. I mean, this bullet did some things and defied the law of physics that are similar to Dallas. Though the laws of physics apply everywhere else, but in Dallas, the laws of physics did not apply, and that bullet was able to do some remarkable things, going downward, then upwards into the president's back, and then exiting out of the president's throat, changing directions at a angle about 45 degrees, going from right to left, changing directions and going downward, hitting John Connally, who was governor of Texas at that time, sitting in the middle seat, and hitting him in the back, exiting out of his fifth rib, breaking that bone, entering into his wrist, hitting a bone there, and entering into his leg, and that bullet, almost in pristine condition, ending up on the stretcher, presumably the stretcher that John Connally was on. And to look at that bullet, hidden bone, and it wasn't smashed, is a remarkable bullet, certainly a magical bullet, as they label it, to have done all of that damage. Of course, they had to make the single bullet theory work, because without it, then that automatically means there's more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza at that time. And it also means that there necessarily would have to have been a conspiracy, which they were trying their best not to draw that conclusion, because it would raise a lot of eyebrows in the minds of the American people that a president can be killed by a conspiracy in this country, and the intelligence community was not able to, in fact, be involved in stopping this killing, because if it's a conspiracy, then the conspirators had to have some dialogue. And if you whisper in this country, those whisperings are caught on tape. And for there to have been a conspiracy not being caught, then that begins to raise a question about whether or not there's some entrapment of people inside the intel community. And they were not going to allow that to get through. And so Earl Warren was head of the commission to look into it, and these persons were very carefully chosen to be on this commission, because I would contend, and I do contend this after looking at this case over the course of a lot of years, that this commission wasn't set up to bring about the finding of fact, but to cover up a fait accompli. We had the president already dead, and people being led to believe that if they actually found out what happened in Dealey Plaza, it would be traced into Cuba, and by way of Cuba through that to Russia, and we could have a nuclear war on our hand, because the American people concluded that this was something done by communist forces outside the country, and that Castro was involved in it, and therefore through Castro, Nikita Khrushchev, who was the prime minister of that time of Russia, was involved in it. The American people would have demanded a retaliation, and they made the commission believe that that would be where the finger would end up being pointed in that direction, and some finding of culpability of those two different instruments, Cuba and Russia. And the American people would demand therein some retaliation for the killing of this beloved president. And so the 7 members of the committee were to, with the idea in mind, they were doing the public good by, in fact, putting this thing to rest, because where it could lead to the war of not just one person, but 40 million persons could be killed if there was a thermonuclear exchange between these countries that they were led to believe were involved in it. So I understand the cover-up and the rational view of it by those members that were chosen to actually not look into this crime, but to cover this crime up, because they thought that it involved some person that came from outside the country. This was not a assassination that came from outside the country. This was a problem that I contend right now Donald Trump is facing from what is called the deep state. And I hope to be able to put some meat on the skeleton of that accusation, because I am convinced after looking at this case over the course of a lot of years, more years than I would care to mention, that this was a deep state hit on the President of the United States and a reversal of the election that had been held in 1960, in which quote-unquote Camelot was put into the White House. And there was a election that was held where the person that became president, through a lot of different things that happened there, and some of them were some things happened under the table that was not supposed to happen, just like the election of Donald Trump wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, how many persons are surprised at what occurred on November the 8th, 2016, when Donald Trump was elected President of the United States? How many of you had your mouth open and you were aghast at the unexpected taking place? It wasn't supposed to take place, because Donald Trump was given no shot. And when John F. Kennedy ran in 1960, he's running against Richard Nixon, who was running after being vice president in a very popular election, the two-term administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower, the general that was involved in World War II, and he was a very popular president, elected first of all in 1952, running against Adlai Stevenson. And the Democrats, by the way, that year had the same problem they have right now, nobody to run. And so they ran Adlai Stevenson in 1952, and we saw a replay of that election in 1956 when they ran Adlai Stevenson. The Democrats ran Adlai Stevenson again in 1956. And did you see where Hillary Clinton was running in 2008? And she lost to Barack Obama in that year. And in 2016, after Barack Obama served 2 terms, Hillary Clinton is running again in that year, and she lost. She got the nomination that year, but she lost in the general election. This time she lost to Donald J. Trump. And who's going to run into it? Let me ask a question here as I pause for a second from our general discussion. Just ask this question. Who's going to run in 2020 in the Democratic Party? Who do you see out there that is going to be the standard bearer? Because that person right now has not arrived on the scene, and we can't tell who the candidate is going to be because nobody stands out at this point. And as it sad as it may make a lot of people to say this, from all appearances, and despite the Washington Post, and despite what is reported in New York Times, Donald Trump looks to be a 2-term president, because he said last week, and I think it's true based upon what I'm looking at, in my own looking at this, as what's going on beyond the press now, beyond the fake news media, that Donald Trump's support has actually expanded since the election, and during the last 8 months, his base has in fact increased. It hasn't decreased because of these reports. People know what's going on, and Donald Trump is going out and having these rallies, and the person attending those rallies look like the campaign is still going on. So this narrative that he's doing so badly, and look at the chaos of his administration and all these things, is not borne out by him going, this latest of going to West Virginia and having a rally there. And did the press report that once he got there, that the governor of that state, who saw the handwriting on the wall, saw that in his state, Donald Trump won the vote there by 42 percentage points. So he does what? He changes his party from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And politicians don't do that in terms of joining a team if they think it's a losing team. But you think that was headlines? You think that was headlines in the media? No, the next day, the media was talking about Russia again. The headlines hadn't changed. But wouldn't that be news that a Democratic governor would have thrown his hat in the ring with Donald Trump and announced that he was now a Republican. And by the way, the Republicans now have all the governorships with the exception of 15 governorships. There are 15 governors in the country that are Democrats. The rest of them are Republicans.
You know, I brought up to the fact the other day, I was one of the guys running for local office here they're not supposed to be partisan politics, for the council seats. But anyway, I brought up he was running, his sympathies more along the Democratic Party. And I said, well, do you notice though that most states that are prosperous, actually booming, that people are doing well, they're prosperous, are headed up by Republican governors. And he goes, and he said, I can't deny it. I can't deny that. I can't. It's a fact. It is. I mean, it's because like Texas is doing really well. I mean, other states, Texas sticks out. I mean, it's just the thing is, okay, I don't like cutting back totally on some social policies and social programs, but just having people come into an area like they had Michigan for the 60s and 70s, came from other states just to get here, to get on the welfare system.
Yes.
It was a sole intention. They weren't like totally disfigured or disabled. They couldn't work. They just chose not to come here to get the the handouts, the best of the handouts. I get southern states used to make a quip of how they handled their the governors of the southern states. They said how we handled our welfare program. We gave everybody who qualified a bus ticket to Michigan, and that's the reason why we have so many generations. That was in the late '60s. That was in the '70s when that guy said it.
Yeah.
So I mean, now we're at 2017. That's a good telling statement right there.
Yeah, and the South has, which was solidly behind the Democratic Party, is now solidly Republican. And so the West Virginia governor, really in a way, he is a Johnny-come-lately because the South has turned Republican. And I would take Dinesh D'Souza's argument here is that as the South became less racist, it became more Republican. And you see that going on as the South began to, Democratic Party began to lose its stranglehold on the South becoming less racist, became more Republican, and that's what we have right now. Of course, everybody's going to say the opposite occurred, but that's not really true. What has happened is that the solid South is now almost solidly behind the Republican Party, and this governor switching his party is in line with what the South was doing over the course of in the post-1960s period, now culminating to the point where they have joined into what we see throughout the country. And that trend, by the way, is a good trend for this country in terms of the country getting away from some of the welfare state kind of things that really, if we don't get control of, is going to do this country in. But right now we have 15 governors that are members of the Democratic Party. 35 of them, therefore, are members of the Republican Party. And we have to understand something here, that if the election of Donald Trump was really caused by Russian collusion, the question then comes up, what then explains all these other losses that the Democratic Party has in fact suffered over the last 8 years? We're talking about what? Between 1,000 to 1,200 seats being lost throughout the country. They had something like 22 governors at the time of Obama's election in 2008, and they're now down to 15. They had control of both the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency in 2008, and they lost control of the House in 2010, talking about the Democrats. They lost control of the Senate in 2014, and 2 years later, they lost the presidency. Now, if you're going to attribute Donald Trump's victory to the Russian collusion, you've got to then look at these other Republican victories and then attribute that to what then? What would explain those other losses Democrats have had over the last 8 years? And if Russia caused the one, then what is the explanation for the other losses? Because the other losses are consistent with the loss that occurred on November the 8th, 2016. You have to go back and look at the other elections that were held and what happened in order to put this in context. And of course, I hope you won't ever do that, because then the narrative would be put to bed about this having been done because of the collusion between Donald Trump's campaign, which is pure nonsense, and the Russians on the one hand, and then the Trump administration on the other hand, and they have this quote unquote finding or fact to be found somewhere in the future because they're still looking. I had some person that was writing on my wall, by the way, my Facebook wall, because a lot of people think they have something to teach me. They come on these posts and they're going to give me a what's up, because what I'm writing about and what I'm saying is outside of the, politically correct landscape. And so they have to give me the mountaintop point of view. They have to give me the right view, because my view is the wrong view, because it's not the politically correct view or the majoritarian view. And I don't speak through the lens of political correctness. I speak through the lens of what my research shows to be true. And I invite those that have another point of view to come on the on the post to certainly school me.
Can they do that though without name calling? I mean, it's just like I'll invite people. I never assume. I'm not a leftist. I don't assume I'm omniscient.
Yeah,
so
right.
If they want to bring up years ago, I used to be anti, marijuana, and now I'm on board for legalization because this simple economic fact that doesn't seem to me to make a decent payoff, incarcerating people for relatively minor offenses. The only reason why it's offenses is because somebody doesn't like marijuana. So the legislators didn't like marijuana. Maybe they tried it in college and it wasn't for them, so they want to make it ban it. And they want to. So that works. But I mean, I didn't go around calling people names. They made a presentation. They won the intellectual argument. But it seems like on the left, they want to vilify it, and they assume that they're so more intelligent, so much more educated than everybody else. And I think, and you sit back and when they make their case, it's just a series of name calling and then try to pathologize you.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're trying to use you're mentally ill. You're mentally ill if you don't agree with me.
Yes.
Who's spitting flecks of spit at me when they're talking? Yeah. So
John, you're making a great point. They've actually, some of them have come on my post, and they were right. I disagree, and they put a period there, and there's no information that follows those two words. Now I'm writing 2 pages, and I have to really work to cut it down to 2 pages, because normally my post is like 3 and 4 pages. I have to cut it down from that, because I look up and all of a sudden I look at how much I've written, and I try to write within an hour, so I'm not spending too much time because they have other things to do. But I look up and then all of a sudden I got 4 or 5 pages. I got to cut it down, and then they'll write on my post and say I disagree and dismiss all that which I wrote with 2 words, with no argument and no data to back up the claim of why, or even to show me why they disagree. In other words, the way the left sees it is because of the disagreement takes the place of the argument. They don't need to come in and give a studied view of why they disagree. It's just the fact that the disagreement stands as the argument, therefore nothing else needs to be said. You're wrong because of the indictment being the accusation, not being the data. And when you require the data, as I do, then the name calling starts. It's just like what some persons say, that you are a sellout, or you are a racist, and so on and so forth. All these accusations by the left, because when the left loses an argument, which they lose all the arguments based upon the data, then you are being accused of something, because the argument then comes lends itself and folds into the accusation of you are this and you are something else, and that takes the discussion away from what you're discussing. But what I'm discussing is that on the one hand, right now on Facebook, what I'm discussing is that the Kennedy assassination went into a ambush. And John, you keep up with the time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm keeping up, and we're going to be coming up here real quickly, and we're coming up in the 26-minute mark, which means we're going to pause and have a break here, so the if people from WFOV could, get their station break and also get their announcements and stuff in. So we're coming up on that real quick, and then we'll be talking and stuff like that, and we'll come back at the 30-minute mark, and we'll talk about what we will recap, basically what we covered while they're in their absence. So, and it's coming up real quick, and 25 minutes. And we'll count down to right here. So anyway, here's the break, and we'll go on, like I said, and then we'll give a recap at 30. I'll give you the signal, okay?
Okay. We're taking a break from the program on WFOB. Again, we're very glad to have them aboard. When we come back in 4 minutes, we will recap what we're doing here in the time they're away from the program. I was talking about the fact that John F. Kennedy was led into an ambush, and that creates a lot of problems because it challenges the narrative that a single person, Lee Harvey Oswald, was in the 6th floor of the cafeteria of the school depository building in Dallas, in Dealey Plaza, and he was up there on the 6th floor ready to shoot the president at that as the motorcade passed by, when that doesn't fit the time sequence, because we can put Lee Harvey Oswald in that cafeteria 10 minutes before the shooting began. He's down there having lunch, and so I guess and by the way, the motorcade had been delayed. He doesn't know that, but the motorcade had been delayed somewhat, and so he's down there in the cafeteria having lunch. And then in the aftermath of that, I think I go up on the 6th floor because I got to be ready when the motorcade comes by. They know the motorcade has been postponed, and if it had not been postponed, he would never have gotten up there in the time period after they'd seen him in the cafeteria having lunch. And he's up there doing the shooting. 3 bullets are fired, and 2 of them hit the president. The last shot was a kill shot. One bullet having missed, and therefore 1 bullet having to do all the damage we see done in the president's body and also that of John Connally. It doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work in terms of the evidence, because the president is hit 4 times. And I know this case as well as most persons who studied this case. I want to give a shout out to a person that died last week on the 2nd of this month. A person by the name of Jim Marrs, M-A-R-R-S. Jim Marrs, who had one of the best books, one of the best books out there. Although there are a lot of good books out. A person that put the homework in and did the research to find out what really did happen in Dealey Plaza, and we know what happened in Dealey Plaza. We know, and we know the names pretty much of the active players. But Jim Marrs was a very honest, very erudite researcher, and he passed away last week of natural causes, dying at the age of 73. This man spent more than half his life looking at the evidence in this case, and his book, Crossfire: The Plot to Kill Kennedy, should be and would be a must-read, and would be required reading in public schools, private and public schools. If they were not, in fact, controlled by the government, it would be required reading. That book is a masterpiece, because the president was caught in the crossfire. And okay. I would add and say,
okay, we're coming back now to the viewers of WFOV, and welcome back, everybody. And we're going to give a brief recap. Okay, I'll go.
Yeah, we're just simply talking about the assassination of John F. Kennedy and putting some meat on the skeleton, because I think the claims are very much clear today that the president was caught in crossfire. And I was saying here that Jim Marrs, a person whose name should go down in history as one of the great Americans, one of the super patriots, who died last week. He died August the 2nd, and Jim Marrs' book called Crossfire, I think is kind of like the Bible of what occurred there, along with the other books such as Plausible Denial and Robert Lipton's book. His book is very important. You can go look at some of the work done by a person that is one of the great researchers out there, Robert Groden, who's done some excellent work. Who else book should be mentioned in this genre? So many of them. Mark Lane's book, Plausible Denial. That book should be mentioned. You have to read all of you. I would say read all the works out there that have done the research that put together a composite of what really occurred in Dealey Plaza on November the 22nd, 1963. I would say also look at the Abraham Zapruder film that captured this assassination. A person that was down there that was told to move a couple of times because they had a lot of person in Dealey Plaza that was involved in this plot, that were carrying these Secret Service credentials, and they were trying to make sure that they were moving people around where they would not be there as the evidence what they knew was going to happen in that area. This meant the president there was no way the president was coming out of Dealey Plaza alive, and that he was caught in triangular fire where he was moving away from the fire and also moving toward the fire, because there's also a shooter in the grassy knoll, and there was a shooter on the 6th floor, but it was not Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald didn't kill anybody on that day. He didn't kill President Kennedy, and he didn't kill J.P. Tippit. Later on, the officer was killed in Dallas. Oswald didn't kill anybody, and the evidence is very clear about that as well. There's a professor, by the way, that put together one of the best videos that I've seen, and he does a very reasonable job. Dr. PhD, Dr. Croft, he did a brilliant job in putting the evidence on both sides. What I like about his presentation is that he doesn't just take a partisan view where he's just going to show that the Warren Commission report could not be correct. He goes into looking at both sides and weighing in what is said on the one side and then what his conclusions are based upon the evidence that proves otherwise. And I give him a lot of credit because I think his point of view, his treatment of what occurred is the most balanced video treatment that is out there. And I would like to see you go in and watch his treatise on YouTube. It's still there for everybody to see. Very brilliantly put together. And I don't know if I can come behind what Dr. Croft did and say anything behind that. But I'll leave it up to you to go and do your due diligence in that. It's about an hour long, and go check out what he did. But the Lee Harvey Oswald did it scenario doesn't work. And I could name the person on the 6th floor, but it's not Lee Harvey Oswald. There's a shooter up there. There's a shooter on the 6th floor, and there's also a shooter in the Dow Tax building, because the triangle of fire is 2 shooters in the back. And I'm being very conservative in saying there's 1 shooter in the front. There is a shooter in the grassy knoll area. And since that person come out and admitted he was a shooter in the grassy knoll area, I'll mention his name. That's James Fowles that's over there in the grassy knoll. And in fact, he fires the fatal headshot, but there are 2 bullets colliding in the president's head simultaneously. There was 1/100th seconds apart in the 2 bullets. That's why the president's body jerks to the front first and before slam to the back and over to the right. You saw in that film put out by this, I don't have a lot of respect for him, but the film on JFK, that film that's made on the Kennedy assassination, that film repeats to the back and over to the right. to the back and over to the right. That's partially true, but that first bullet temporarily pushes the president's body forward, which that movie missed. And then the other bullet from the grass nose slammed the president back and over to the left, over toward his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, and then back and over to the right, back and over to the right. As the film repeats that to emphasize to the viewers the direction in which the president's body goes. But I'm coming behind the film and correcting the film in terms of the body's move. The president's body moves in both a forward and a backward direction momentarily because two bullets collide in the president's brain and his head at the same time. And that bullet that hit the president from the front is the one that knocks him, because it's the second bullet that hit him, knocks him then, after going forward, knocks him over backwards and over to the right very violently at a speed of 100 feet per second. Been timed by some of those who looked at the Zapruder film to put that together. That is not really what I want to spend all the time on, but want to raise your attention to that because that's what is going on right now and is very controversial. Because the truth is controversial. I'm putting it out there because I want to bring people's attention to what's going on right now with Donald Trump and the same diabolical forces that were at play then, I play right now, but with different players. But the same anti-democratic forces that are in place now as that play in place then. But I'll tell you what I want to do in the last part of the program here today, because this is equally controversial, and I'm going to put some meat on this skeleton as well. And that is the very controversial claim that I made. I'm not the first one to make this claim, and I would pay homage not only to Jim Marrs, who did some of the best research on the Kennedy assassination, but I want to also pay homage to William Kaysing, Kaysing, William Kaysing, who wrote a book in 1976. I'm pretty sure that's the date. And his book is even more controversial than Jim Marrs' work. His book is We Never Went to the Moon. The 30 billion swindle. I think he calls it the 30 billion NASA swindle, or the 30 billion swindle by NASA. And that's where I've done some original research also, and I have a couple of conclusions I'm going to share with you on this program. I want to first of all say that I need to correct, Hollywood is something, isn't it? I need to correct Hollywood, because Hollywood put out a film called Hidden Figures about these three black women that were working at NASA. And that film, by the way, is based on a true story, and those women did, in fact, contribute to NASA's, John Glenn and all of those persons that were involved in the NASA program. They were hidden figures. I mean, you're not going to find their names in a history book, but they played a behind-the-scene role. But the real hidden figures in the NASA program were not those three women. The hidden figures in the NASA program were the 1,600 Nazis that were brought over here from Nazi Germany in the aftermath of World War II. You have to understand something here. And nobody said this, but this is some research that I did, and I will share it with you. It's free. And I dare any of these naysayers, I disagree, those kind of people coming on my posts, saying, I disagree. You can disagree all you want to. I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to come behind this research and claim that you got superior research out there and your data trumps this data. Let me see you do that. And then I'll accept your disagreement. But a two-word dismissal of the research is not going to cut it. I am contending here that after World War II came to a close, go see Dunkirk, and you can watch that too. It's a little bit of brainwashing there as well. They never carry you away from the battlefield. Everything is in Dunkirk. That film, I wish I like my money back. I went there to see a historical event, and all they did was show me some shooting. Well, what happened, let's see, June 26, around that time period, 1940, and about 4 days thereafter, when the Germans lost an opportunity to close the show in World War II at Dunkirk, but because of the blundering of Adolf Hitler and some of the others, they did not close the deal on that army that had been closed in and hemmed in at Dunkirk, and by them not taking advantage of the moment, they allowed for ships, private ships, shipping, people that was out there fishing and things like that. Those boats showed up in a rescue mission, and they rescued some 300,000 soldiers from Dunkirk. And that army goes into England, and they'll live to fight another day. That was a cataclysmic mistake made on the part of the Germans. I'm glad they made it. Don't get me wrong about that. But it made a cataclysmic mistake, and that's going to be part of what sealed the doom of the Germans at this time. But when this war came to a close, the Nazis did not lose the war. The Germans lost the war. The Nazis changed countries. Oh yes, the Germans changed countries. The Nazis changed countries. The Germans lost the war. And you have them going, Eichmann and those persons going into Argentina and those kind of places, Adolf Eichmann, and they're going to be ferreted out of there and brought to trial in Germany later on. But 1,600 of those Nazis were brought into the United States. These were the ones involved in the rocket program in Germany. And the leader of that group was the head of the rocket scientists in Germany. Check this out and go read it for yourself. But I've done the research.
One guy, I was like on the History Channel, said basically the American rocket program was actually the German rocket program.
It was
basically everybody that has changed the people out the people over here, and that can't be missed. I mean, these people, it was terrifying how close they really were, because how long did it take them to be here to actually make it to where they were at?
I'm so glad you said that, John, because I want to say this about that you look at the name of the program that was set up in 1958 called NASA. And John, how close and why do you think it's close between NASA and NASA? NASA and NAZI. You see the closeness here?
Yeah.
Because it was a Nazi program. So you have to understand something here. And I don't completely indict the country. I do want to tell you what happened, but I want you to put this in context of what occurred in 1957. Because John, may ask you, what happened in 1957 in terms of Russia? Sputnik.
Right.
In 1957, Russia had a person orbit the Earth in 1957 called Sputnik, and it sent shock waves in America because it showed that the Russian space program, which we hadn't even gotten off the ground yet, was far in advance of the program here in the United States, and it sent shock waves, panic in the American government, because what that could have meant, given the Cold War, is that Russia was ahead of us in the space program, and would they use space in order now, because they had through the implosion conspiracy, which is written by Louis Nizer, has a brilliant book out called The Implosion Conspiracy, where through the Rosenbergs, and I think that's true, that the Rosenbergs and some of the others that were enemies inside the government that passed off the nuclear secrets to Russia, and now they have nuclear weapons, and now they're exceeding us in the space program. That caused tremendous concern. And go look at the date of Sputnik, the orbit of the Earth by astronauts from Russia in 1957, and look at the beginning of the space program in the United States, which took place October the 1st, 1958, named NASA, NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Agency, NASA, NASA. But it's real close, isn't it, to Nazi? By a strange coincidence, isn't it? Strange happenstance. Because the hidden figures in the program, I know the women were hidden figures, and since nobody knew because of the segregation going on at that time, that there were these women, black women, that worked on that program. One was a mathematical genius. I'm glad that film came out. But the real hidden figures were the 1,600 persons they were Nazis. They worked on the space program in Germany. They were transported over here in the aftermath of World War II. And you have to keep in mind that where the public was being led to believe that the federal government began to infuse a lot of money into the science program and the math program in the United States, they did in fact do that. But that's to germinate into some fruits in the next generation. They need a response to what Russia had accomplished in 1957. They need that response right now. And so on October the 1st, 1958, America starts its space program in NASA, and guess who the hidden figures are in that program? Those 1,600 German scientists that are now involved in infusing themselves in the space program here in the United States. And the one that was over the rocketry in Germany was none other than Werner von Braun, who's heading that program. And in 1958, when they started, then that program had gotten underway in reaction to Sputnik, so as to start a space program over here, and they're doing catch up. In 1950, in 1961, I want to get the date straight, and I'll be exactly correct in what I'm saying here. In 1961, Gus Grissom, one of the 7 astronauts that was on the team, who had who was assigned to a suborbital orbit that lasts about 15 minutes in a module called the Liberty Bell, came back after 15 minutes in orbit and had a splashdown in the ocean. You have to break the landing is so violently coming at such a speed. You have a splashdown into the ocean, but in splashing down, there was a detonation that occurred where the seals of the capsule blew open, and when that capsule came down, water began to fill up in the capsule, and Gus Grissom escaped out of the capsule to save his life and swam to shores, swam to safety. And the helicopter overhead trying to save the capsule, unable to do so because the water is making the capsule much heavier. They have to cut the strings that they were trying to pull it up with. They couldn't do it, and to make sure that they weren't pulled down into the pulled down because of the weightiness, they cut the strings, and that capsule was in fact lost. And Grissom took a lot of heat for it, saying he had panicked, and that's what caused that module to be lost, and so on and so forth. At that point in time, what I'm contending here is that I'm contending that nobody thought at that time to look at NASA, which was unprepared to do the job that they were putting upon NASA. And don't forget that same year, John F. Kennedy. Now, John F. Kennedy was a politician. He was not a scientist. He was not a scientist in the same way that Al Gore is not a scientist. Al Gore was talking about global warming as if he's a scientist. And now you got to have the science now meeting up with the accusation the globe is warming in Al Gore's case. And when Kennedy said in his inaugural address that we choose to go to the moon and to do the other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. John F. Kennedy has now put a challenge upon the scientific community, and they have to meet that challenge, because he's saying that they have chosen to land a man on the moon in that decade, which means he got to do it before 1970, because Kennedy was giving his speech on January the 20th, 1961, and therefore, within that decade, it got to happen before 1970, based upon the president putting that out there. Just like Al Gore put out there, we got to end global warming. Of course, I could tell Al Gore, since you're talking about carbon emissions, one way to deal with carbon emissions, if that's what's causing it, just grow more trees, create more plant food. That's what carbon is. It stands a growing season.
There's more trees now than there were probably maybe 100 years ago.
Yeah.
There's more trees now.
Right.
I mean, I just read a statistic years ago. They give the date. I can't remember. I just read it yesterday. There were 60 trees per person. Now there's 120 trees per person.
That's right.
So,
John, the tree population has grown just as the polar bears at the North Pole have grown. They say they used to go out there and take a photograph of these Polish bears. Now, Polish bears are not gregarious animals. They're not like the lions, right? Because in order for a lion to bring down large prey, they have to bring down a buffalo, for example. That's a large animal. That animal is larger than a lion. A lion can't hunt a buffalo by himself because those horns in that. He's got to have one to grab his nose. You got to have another one get up there on his back and then paralyze him by grabbing his spinal cord and hold on to that. One grab his nose to stop his breathing. One's got to jump on his back, right? And then once you bring him down, one got to go to his throat. Neither one can turn it loose because his horns are dangerous. But a polar bear is not like that. A polar bear is not a gregarious animal. He travels by himself. So they go up there to the North Pole and take a polar bear who's on vacation, out there laying up there on a small layer of ice, because he doesn't want any company, because he doesn't need any help. Bring down a seal, one bear can do that. And he's out there on a vacation on a piece of ice by himself. They go up there and photograph the polar bear on vacation from the rest of the polar bears. And they say, this shows you that the ice is in fact melting at the North Pole. We got to do something. John, and before you know it, we used to have global cooling, and they were talking about the globe is going to freeze, and they had that from the turn of the century to about 1979, and then 1979 they changed their mind and decide that it's not the goal. The globe is not going to freeze. The globe is going to warm, and we're gonna burn up. And they changed their mind. And now Al Gore is out there, a politician, not a scientist, telling us we got to do something. And so now the people being herded in order to stop now global warming. It used to be global cooling. And none of that stuff is true.
Well, it applies. Besides, I got to remind us too, we're coming up to the 57 mark, so we're going to wrap it up and remind people to watch this on, All Points TV and on the YouTube, as well as our website www.allpointstv.com. Also, they can see the current shows too up on Comcast Channel 17. No, I agree that when I was a kid, it was we're going to be the next ice age. And that was right up like when I was in high school.
Scared you to death.
And then, because I figured this way. There's not much you can do about it. If it was going to be ice age, you just basically going to have to shrink back the population. To a certain area where they can find food, and then they will recede after. I don't know how you can change that. I really don't. But Al Gore, I just read this the other day. His home consumes 34% more. 34 times the amount energy of the average home.
Right. Was he concerned?
Yes. He just, what is he practicing? And then he flits around the world in a jet, using diesel, jet fuel. which is really not good for the environment, I don't think. So I just think he's a walking hypocrite.
He is a
at every
hypocrite.
turn. So.
And John, they don't expect anybody to know any enough science to challenge the unscientific and politically correct narrative that that's what's going on. You know, you have to understand how vast the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy is. I mean, anyway. We'll pick this up next week. But all the things that are being said here, we need to go into it and to explain what really is going on here. I'm going to pick this narrative up next week because I want to finish up what is really going on here with NASA, because that is something we have to pay attention to, particularly with what's going on right now in terms of Donald Trump. I want to put that in context. We'll finish it up in our next episode.
Yeah, again, people, this is what's going on with George Moss, and we're at All Points TV here in Flint as well. Please listen to us there at our website, also on YouTube. Also, continue to listen to whatever time slot is allocated to our WFOV, and we really are glad that we're on board with you and you're on board with us, and we hope to hear comments and criticism even, and we also have several other shows that goes up here on All Points TV, and we'd like you to watch them. Subscribe to our channel on All Points TV on YouTube. So anyway, and
we'll finish it up by saying we want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.